Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. So many of us have this aversion to public speaking, also giving presentations, especially nowadays. You got to do Zoom videos, and many of us, when we're asked to do that through our job or just need to do it in general, like there's just some uncomfortableness that comes along with that. Now, add to that an interview, job interview potentially. There's even more nervousness, anxiety. How can you ace those interviews? How can you prepare for them? We're going to talk with somebody that works with people all the time. This is a worldwide company. They are known around the globe for what they do in helping people with their presentations, making them effective. That's a company's name, Effective Presentations. And she's one of the people from there. Breelyn joins us here on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Steve?
Fantastic. Fantastic. And I'm glad we're talking about this. I hear it from so many friends. You know, I've been working in radio broadcast for a long time, and they'll come to me and say, well, how do you do it? And yeah, I had those jitters and all of that. You know, back in the day, you got to overcome them. And sometimes new challenges come up and sometimes new jitters come up. What's your first word of advice for somebody that's going to do an online job, either presentation or maybe we'll focus on a job interview? What's the first thing you would tell them?
Very first thing I would always say is treat any virtual meeting, whether it's an interview or you have to make a really good first impression, a presentation, even to colleagues and folks that know you really well, no matter who the audience is or no matter what you're talking about, treat that virtual meeting exactly the same way as you would if that meeting was taking place in person. And that has to do a lot with how you look on screen, which a lot of people aren't going to like this, but that means turning your camera on. I know so many people who they go to their job and they do these meetings on Teams or Zoom or Google Meet. And you know what? I just, I'm working from home today, so I'm in my pajamas. I'm going to leave my camera off. Hey, I don't blame you. You would probably not do that on an interview, but sometimes we're wearing pajamas on the bottom half and suit and tie on the top half. That's okay. Do whatever you need to do to make sure you feel comfortable, and sure, take advantage of working from home or take advantage of the fact that you are virtual, but not too much. Anything that people can see and hear through that camera and that microphone, treat it exactly the same way as you would if you were sitting right across the table from them. And that involves a couple of things.
Let's get into those.
Love it.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Couple of things. Number one, you got to make sure that whatever is on your screen, you're happy with. Now, I don't mean, well, I'm never happy when I look in the mirror. Okay, that's another problem to look at. But what I mean is when you're looking on screen and you look at yourself, one thing that I like to do is I go through a list of 3 main points to make sure that your video camera is looking great. And you're actually following all those rules, Steve, so I'll kind of list them out for you.
I'm going to jump in there right now.
Okay.
Don't mean to cut you off, but we just changed up a PC, so it's faster processing speed, all of that today, which is why I was a couple of minutes late with the audio. And to me, this is unacceptable. Uneven lighting is still a work in progress, but I get what you're saying. Like it's like inviting people over to your house, right? You're having a party. You want to be ready to welcome the party. That includes cleaning and everything else.
Yes. Absolutely, it does. Yeah. And I'm right there with you. I would have a couple little things I would like to change with the lighting that I've got too, but
it looks good though. Really good.
Thanks. And yours does too. Here are the 3 rules that I like to make sure I'm taking a look at, specifically just with the video camera and its placement. I can go into sound and lighting as well. But number 1, I always like to make sure I'm in the center third of my Zoom square, whether you're on Google Meet, on Teams, whatever it might be. The zooming in is going to be a little bit different, but just at least make sure you're right in the middle. Anytime that you are over to the side, you've got a lot of dead space here, no matter how interesting your background is. But then if you use a gesture, it's going to get cut off. And normally when you're sitting across from somebody, if you're going to compare it to that, you would want to be facing them face on. You wouldn't be kind of off to the side. Right there in the center third, I call it the rule of thirds. The second thing I usually talk about is I want you to try and be about an arm's length away from your camera. And that varies with different cameras, of course. I have one that I can actually zoom in and out with. Pretty fancy. I'm excited about it. But
hey, drop the name of your camera. What kind is it?
It's an Avaya, Avaya.
Any particular model?
Not that I can see from
Okay.
where I'm sitting.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah.
I love it. You can zoom in and out, you can switch it. There's a remote that comes with it. So I love that thing. So that makes it a little bit easier as well. But I like to be about an arm's length distance away from it. And that used to work with my Logitech cam as well, because it's not too close where you're looking at my nose and you see all my pores, and I'm not too far away where I'm really, really tiny. Again, it's about the same distance I would sit across from someone with.
Mm. And all you gotta, yeah, just if it's Zoom, all you have to do is hit the video button and you can tweak and adjust and all of that. And just, we're working together. I'm going to throw this out in your video settings. If you don't check off HD, typically it's going to be closer in on your face, more like this. I could do it and show you, but the point is, if you click HD, it fills the frame further. And with that, you're a little bit further away. You might feel more comfortable that way.
Yep.
Like I feel that we're both placed about the same distance. Like there you go. I'm touching the camera right there. That's
Yep.
an arm's length right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, I could sit here and I can zoom all the way out and it would look like I'm further, but
Hmm.
it just depends. Generally, to place yourself that far away feeds into some good results. The third and final step I always give people, and this one is a really good one to just set up the rest of it. If you only have time to do one of those 3 steps, it's this one. I call it the pinch test. You find the top of your head, you find the top of your square on your screen, and if the space between the two is bigger than just a pinch, we got to do some adjusting. So for example, if my camera was pointed further
Sure.
up, which a lot of people will work on a laptop and it's lower down, and so the camera's going to be pointing upwards, you got a lot of ceiling
Yep.
and probably won't be at a great angle. This is not passing the pinch test. We've got a lot of space here. So what I'll do is I'll bring my camera down just slightly. I'm
Sure.
not going to cut off the top of my head, but now I look a little bit closer to if I was sitting right across the table from you.
In the video world, we call that headroom. When you're
Headroom.
doing, yeah, that's what it is. You got too much headroom, tighten that up a little bit. Yeah, great tips.
Absolutely.
This is, yeah, when we're worried about making the presentation, what we're going to say and all of that, I think a lot of times we forget about this tech stuff. But when it's set right and you're comfortable with it, you're even more comfortable with yourself and what you have to say, because you're looking at yourself like, oh, I look better now. I'm not all the way over here or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And there's other things to think about too, of how you sound. If you're going to turn your head, is it going to change the way your microphone is picking up your voice? Other things that you can think about that we don't have to go into, just because when you are doing an interview or a really important presentation virtually, as long as your camera's set up nice. The other thing that I usually say to people is think about the other ways that you might want to prepare for an in-person meeting. You mentioned earlier, it's like cleaning up before someone comes over to your house.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that whatever is in your background, you're okay with people seeing. Now, I know that there are virtual backgrounds. I have a personal opinion on those, that I would rather you be able to use a lot of hand gestures and not get the blur to cut off your fingers than to have that virtual background. So make something behind you look great and make it kind of show your personality. If you only have a blank wall, that's fine too. But like you said, Steve, when your technology, your background, your screen is all set up, now all you have to focus on is being yourself.
Yep. Yep. It's just a state of mind where you feel better. I'm gonna push another button and show. I don't know if you've seen this one. This is, if you go into backgrounds and effects, talking Zoom here, portrait lighting will make a difference
Ooh.
to highlight you. It'll put the background a little bit out of focus and it just highlights you. So, and comes with
That's wonderful.
Zoom.
That must be a new one.
Yeah. It's Zoom Workplace. So they rolled that out about a week or so ago, week and a half.
Okay.
So man, one click and there you go. So yeah, just a different setting.
I love it. That's good to know.
What else you got?
Anything that's going to make you feel a little bit better. When I am interviewing people, because I've actually been, like I said, interviewing new trainers to possibly hire a brand new one. And the one thing, or a couple of the things that I'm looking at when I'm trying to choose the best candidate is how comfortable do they seem just simply communicating with me? Not how comfortable do they seem with their technology, not how comfortable do they seem based on their lighting. Those things really do matter. In fact, we met one candidate who the words coming out of this person's mouth were great, but the display of how they were using their virtual world was throwing us off a little bit. It was distracting. It was almost as if we were sitting across from another person, from that person, they would be not making good eye contact or looking at their phone the whole time. That's kind of what I like to equate it to. So making sure that the technology is great, sure. One other thing to always pay attention to, though, is what would you wear and how would you present yourself when you are doing an interview? A lot of the time when you go into an office to do an interview, what are you going to wear? Maybe a suit and a tie, maybe a dress and some heels, maybe something that looks really nice and professional. And then how are you going to make yourself up? If you're anyone like me, you're going to put some makeup on, you're going to do your hair. You might want to just make sure you're groomed nicely. Same exact thing for these virtual meetings. I think ever since the pandemic, when all of us were kind of forced to work virtually, and all of us have some kind of taste in getting on a virtual meeting, I like to treat it as a brand new technology. Even though it's been around, I mean, I remember Skyping my grandmother when I was a kid. It's not a brand new technology, but using it as frequently as we are now, I kind of like to see it that way. I always compare it to back when the very first smartphone came out, the very first iPhone. I'm not sure exactly which year that was, but how long did it take society to get completely used to it to where everyone has one in their hand now? Almost 10
Sure.
years.
Yeah.
There were so many different versions of a smartphone, but now it's the norm. It took about 10 years for that to happen. A couple decades before that, when the microwave oven was invented, how long did it take for every single home to have a microwave in it? If you're renting now and there's no microwave in there, that's kind of weird. We should probably put that on the lease.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of what I like to compare virtual meetings to is we're not quite used to it yet. We're not quite used to it yet. We take a little bit of advantage of the fact that, cool, I get to just be at my house. It's kind of just like a phone call, so I can look however I want. When in reality, we really want to compare it to as almost as if we were in person.
It's almost as if, and the technology, I feel we're 3.5 years into widespread Zoom use, if you will, because of COVID. I feel that we're getting a little more comfortable, but maybe not so much in terms of what we present ourselves with. Yes, it was kind of cool back in the day during COVID. You'd have, a network news anchor at home. Oh, that's what it looks like when they're just being them. Oh, the cat walked across the screen. That's all good. But I think we got a little too relaxed in terms of and especially for interviews or important. If this is just a meeting with your team and you're just, hanging out and you're catching up on a Friday afternoon, all right, maybe you don't have to dress a certain way. You want to be presentable, but but when it's a job interview, 100,000%, you want to make sure that you look your best. Let's be honest too. I love your opinion. If you're home and the baby cries or the cat walks across the screen, it's real. It's okay. Don't freak. It's
Yes.
okay. Maybe hide the cat, put him in another room. But if it happens, it's it's not the end of the world. It shows a real side of you. I feel.
I totally agree. It does show a real side of you and things that are happening in real life for the people that you're talking to as well. I know oftentimes when we come to work or even go into an interview in person, sometimes we'll talk about our life back at home and people don't really get to see it, but we
Sure.
always discuss it. We're human beings.
Right.
If it just happens to be in my background, because yes, the place that I'm working from right now is my home.
Sure.
Yeah, you might hear my kid cry. You might see my cat walk across the table. But I do agree with you. We want to try to eliminate distractions. For example, if you were to walk into an office building for an interview, you would probably put your phone on silent. If it was ringing, you wouldn't say, "Oh, hold on, so sorry, my kid's calling me." Unless it was an emergency, of course. But
Sure.
most of the time, we set ourselves up for success and we try to avoid any really big distractions or things that might change people's impression of us. We have to do the same thing virtually. I think you're right in that we've gotten a little too relaxed with it. We're
Yeah.
starting to take advantage of the fact that it's completely accessible to us. We can use it or we don't have to. And a lot of the time, we're almost using it as we normally would a phone call. I always tell people,
Mm.
especially folks who don't like to turn their cameras on during meetings or trainings, if you're not turning your camera on, why are we using Zoom? Why couldn't we just be on a phone call?
Yeah.
What's the difference there?
It's a good point, Breelyn. It's not a video call. So I think we need to remember that. What about presenting well? Job interview, you're not going to know everything that somebody's going to ask you potentially, but should you have little nuggets of info stored in your mind or a direction you can go into? Like, how do we do that?
Absolutely. I first want to say that it's okay in an interview, no matter if it's in person or virtual, to pause, to think,
Mm,
and then to give your thoughtful answer. So often I see people who try to really hurry up and get some answer out, and really the beginning of that answer is, well, that's actually a great question, and I'm thinking about how, and it's kind of just filler. I would much rather see a person in an interview say, that's a really good question. Let me think about that for a moment. And then
100%.
pause.
Yeah.
Allow yourself that time, because it would be the same exact thing in person as it would be virtual. I know virtually there's always a little bit of that lag where if you're pausing, it's going to seem a little bit longer, especially if you feel like you're on the spot. But pause, take a second, and then just talk to them as if they were in front of you.
That pause is way shorter than you think it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And if
always
you
say
start
time
talking
is.
fast, really fast, I want to come up with something real never, it just shows you're nervous. So tap the
Mhm.
brakes. It's okay. Relax. Enjoy it. Yeah, I don't think we enjoy
Absolutely.
it. Savor the moment. You have an opportunity to talk with somebody, share something, them get to know you, and that's what it really is. And in the job interview, a relationship, getting
It
to know
is.
each other.
Yeah, 100%. It's not the end of the world if the conversation didn't go absolutely perfectly. I don't think I've ever had one perfect conversation. Some that I was more proud of than others, I'm sure, but
Hmm.
just being yourself and being able to talk about whatever comes to your mind, of course, in a professional manner. And that pause is going to be your best friend in getting rid of filler words, allowing you to breathe, allowing you to process the question that you were just asked, allowing you to figure out what your next answer is. The pause is the secret ingredient to all of this.
Totally agree. When it comes to presentations, let's pivot from job interviews to presentations. Sure, you can have everything ready. I would suggest not word for word, but just an outline because you should know your stuff if you're giving a presentation. But any other tips to make that go better?
Your presentation, to make it go better, I always get this. I have a controversial opinion. Other people tell me it's controversial. Don't memorize anything. A lot of the time, people think they need to memorize certain points in their speech or their presentation. They need to memorize exactly how they said this one sentence when they're displaying this one piece of data. If that's going to help you to remember a specific quote from somebody and you don't want to mess that up, fine. But what I really prefer people to do, and what has really worked out well with a lot of our public speaking clients, is see if you can break up your information into 3 chunks. And that's the technical word for it that we use, a chunk. What are your 3 big chunks? And then if you can remember what ingredients happen to be inside that chunk, then it allows you to move through a little bit better. The only thing you're having to worry about in that moment is the one chunk that you're on. You're not
Mm,
trying to memorize and recite something. Hey, you know what? Right now, I'm just taking it one step at a time, quite literally. And then when you're done with that chunk, or it's time to move on to the next chunk, even if you didn't fill in all the information, now you have leeway, you have room to grow. You can go into that next chunk. And that way, all right, I'm about halfway through the amount of time that I was allotted. So I should be almost done with my second chunk. If I'm not there yet, I know I need to pick it up. Or if I've already gone pretty far, all right, I'm going to have some time for Q&A, or I can slow down a little bit. That's how I like to have people pace themselves instead of memorizing and saying, okay, when I read all of this out loud or when I say it all out loud, it takes me 12 minutes and 45 seconds. I'd rather you just know, all right, I have 15 minutes to talk and I've got 3 main topics I'm going to speak on. There's multiple ingredients within each of them, but the big thing with those ingredients is it's not like baking, it's more like cooking. In baking, if you forget an ingredient, it's going to change the whole taste. In cooking, sometimes it does, but it's not usually that big of a deal.
I'm not going to agree with you just to agree with you, but I agree with you. And I feel the biggest fear that many of us have with those presentations is forgetting not what we're going to say, or not how we're going to say, but what we wanted to say. For
Yeah.
example, let's say we're doing a technical presentation and I wanted to talk about the freebostatic converter. Hypothetical, I'm going here, but I don't want to forget to talk about the freebostatic converter.
Mhm.
I know about it. I'm going to be able to bring it when I get to it, but I don't want to forget it.
Right.
Is it also, if it's a Zoom video, are you okay with writing your chunks down and putting it on a post-it note? Chunk one, chunk two, chunk three being the freebostatic converter I need to
Absolutely.
talk about. Okay.
Absolutely. And what I recommend oftentimes is I'll either, for example, I have some notes right here from a last previous presentation I had, and I will usually just kind of prop it up right
Sure.
underneath my camera. I'm
Hmm.
more of a pen and paper type of person. That's just because if I'm sitting here reading notes on my computer, To me, it's a little bit more obvious when
Yeah.
people are looking at their camera to talk, looking at faces when they're reacting, but then very obviously reading their notes. So pick a version of that that's going to work for you where it doesn't look too obvious that you're reading something. However, it's also okay to pause and say, let me check my notes real quick. Any audience member, any interviewer would prefer in that case that you go back to what you originally intended to say rather than just trying to make it up or say, oh crap, what was that thing that I wanted to say? We don't want you to spiral in the middle of that. We'd rather you pause and make sure you double check your information.
I'm a big fan of that, and also just writing things down during a dialogue. It's like I've already written down the camera that you mentioned. And
Yep.
when we first talked, before we even got on here, we were going to talk about presentation interviews. I wrote the word interviews. So that kind of just primes my mind where we're going to go with that. Just little, that can't hurt, just to, jot down a couple of things along the way. Um, Last minute thoughts when it comes to presentations or job interviews. What do you got?
A lot of people won't like me saying this. It's not that big a deal. Our brain makes it seem like it's a huge deal. And it is, it's important, obviously. But I think when we're in that fight or flight mode of this better be the most perfect presentation or interview that I've ever done, or else everything fails. We kind of get into that mindset, even if you've done a lot of interviews before, even if you've done a lot of presentations before. Sometimes you hit that one presentation or interview where it feels like it's all out on the line. And if you don't do this perfectly, it's ruined. That's going to ruin it. I think if we go into it just as, you know what, I am going to do my best today. And you have to be okay with that. That's the struggle a lot of people tend to take a little bit of time to get over is if it wasn't the best I've ever done, that's okay. If it was the best I can do today, that's good enough. Now, always strive to be your best, but the best you can do today is just fine.
In 2 words, be you.
Be you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The genuine you will shine through when you are you. But a lot of times this gets in the way of us being who we really are because we're thinking ahead. We're thinking 15 steps ahead. We're worrying about how we're presenting. Oh, I hope the cat doesn't walk in here. I hear him opening the door, all of that kind of stuff. I'll tell you, you're fantastic. You really are, in terms of just breaking it down, making it comfortable and easy to understand. But this is what you do.
It is. I get to do it every day. I love my job.
So tell me, you work with people to improve their presentation, and this today began with you interviewing people for what position?
For one of our virtual part-time trainers, and hopefully in the future, a full-time in-person trainer.
So are you saying somebody who does what you do, but just additional support staff?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. That's an interesting thing, looking for somebody doing a presentation interview with somebody who's going to be doing that. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It has been extremely interesting. We have had to clarify a few things on our job posting because some people are thinking, oh, I get to be a public speaker. Yes, you do, but we're really helping other people get better at public speaking. So no matter how great you are at it, we want to know that you can help others to feel more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And trying to find someone who can do both at the same time, it's tricky.
Interesting.
But we've met a lot of great people.
Yeah. It's got to be fun too. You enjoy what you do?
Oh yeah, I absolutely do. 100%.
Yeah. You're good at it. You're great
Thank
at
you.
it,
I appreciate
actually.
that.
Yeah, you really are. I mean it. Somebody wants to up their game in terms of presentations, needs somebody to walk the journey, just support them, or even engage your company and take a look at what they're doing and maybe make it better. How do they do that?
Effectivepresentations.com. Effective Presentations. I know it's not a catchy name. Maybe it's not that easy to remember, but if you just think, well, how can I make my presentations more effective? There you go. That's why we named it that. You can also find us on LinkedIn. That's where we actually post the most. You can see what we're doing around the globe. We just had one of our other senior trainers get back from training BMO, the Bank of Montreal, out in Chicago, and they had a great time going through some more of a condensed training. But if you want your own individual training, you want a little bit of support, we don't just do corporate clients. We have one-on-one coaching, kind of like I'm talking to Steve right now. I can talk to you. We've got a lot of different options, virtual, in person. We're very accessible.
Awesome. Fantastic talking with you, Breelyn. Appreciate
You
you
as
being
well.
here. Yeah, thanks. And we're coming right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.